So Yu-Gi-Oh! Just dropped the Chronicles deck, the Fallen and the Virtuous. And honestly, this is probably one of the biggest wins in recent years too. Now, before I dive into it, I want to make something very clear. This video isn't to bash Bushiroad or anything of that negative connotation. I've actually made this as more as constructive feedback to make Vanguard better. I really enjoy playing this game and I do want to see it grow further. And I was already honored to be able to be part of the official Bushiroad Content Creator Program too. And I truly believe that it doesn't help the community if the content creators are more like just yes men. What does help is having a voice that speaks with care and pointing out what works and what isn't and what could make the game better for both new and longtime players. So with that being said, let's talk about why Yu-Gi-Oh's latest structure deck is such a win, and imagine if Bushiroad took some notes. Let's get right into it. So this weekend, it was the release of the structure deck. You can get a copy of a structure deck for $20. Now in Yu-Gi-Oh, a playset is 3 copies, so ideally you want to get 3 structure decks. This is nothing new to Yu-Gi-Oh. It's common to get 3 structure decks, but they're like retailing around $12. So basically you're spending about $36 to maybe $40 with taxes. But what's really cool about these is that yes, they're $20 each. So you spend about $60, but everything's foil. And so your playsets are completely foil too. Furthermore, it has actually really desirable reprints in there too as well, with some new cards on top of that to not make this reused deck feel like it's out of date, especially since it's been years since it came out with the original structure deck. But it does give it some lifeblood to be able to use in the metagame. It may not be tier 1, but you best believe you're going to see players playing it at locals and probably some regionals too. What's also interesting is that other content creators are also just as excited and are mentioning that this is a big win and the community really aligns with it too. Even when I went to pick these up in person, like I already had players like, oh yeah, you get so much value and there's a chance that you get a Starlight Rare in one of the extra cards that you get. I didn't even know that you get an extra card on top of that. And really what that shows and when that happens is that something is done right. But now let's pivot to Vanguard. And in recent months, they've done a wonderful job on moving in the right direction with these master deck sets. This is the Leonor one and also the Jejul one. On top of that these are complete decks for $50 that players can easily have as an entry product and be able to play for fun, especially with their friends. This is also an easy pickup for longtime players that want a fun deck on the side too, but if it could also be played at locals or regionals, that's even a plus, right? However, what's interesting about these decks is that they're not as seen as often anymore, and it's been a couple months since they're released too. I actually looked at the BCS Rosemont deck list, and again, Bushiroad did a wonderful job on releasing all the deck lists from those players from that event. We're talking about 300 plus players participating in the event. I noticed that there was 0 Jejul and then about 6 Leonorns still being played around at least. And of course, with the metagame with Bob Zarga, Virgila, Heartluru being played at multitudes. So it may be struggling to even keep up with the tier 2 representation in a way too. But I digress from that. One of the main things with the product is that it's all comments. That was actually really shocking too when I did the product openings. That's actually the reasons that I already had these to begin with. I did product openings and you had the high rarity card that you would get, like the critical trigger or the draw trigger and so on. But everything else didn't feel as exciting or as great. And I just recently did the box opening for the Chronicles deck and everything was shining. I was actually really impressed, even with cards that I probably wasn't going to use, to be quite frank. But I think there's a good feeling for the player that they know that they spent their money pretty well, especially when it comes to like just holos in general. And not everything in the Chronicles deck was like a secret rare or ultimate rare. Like a lot of it was ultra rare, and the extra card was a secret rare. And then if you got the lucky chance, you might get a Starlight Rare. But overall, I feel like most Yu-Gi-Oh players right now are feeling a little more satisfied than Vanguard players when they got the master deck sets, knowing that they're pretty much comments, and also how can they compete in the current metagame at the time, especially with Boz Varga being at full power in the English side for a hot minute. And trust me, Bushiroad has come a long way, especially with the deck sets with the Stride ones. As you can see, like I got the Shiranui ones and the Night Rose, and the issues with that is that if you wanted everything shiny, a play set in Vanguard is 4. So you needed to get 4 of these bad boys, which came out to $200 retail. And that's if you pre-ordered. I noticed once on release, a lot of retail stores were bumping the price up. Some very crazy, especially with the Shiranui ones, like hitting 100 plus. I was able to find a store to pay $70 for at least the basic one. More on that later. Shiranui and Luar were really the ones that were metagame relevant, and especially with Shiranui, the powerhouse that it dominated for almost a year, pun intended. But there's also generics that you still needed outside the box more than what people would use a pure Chronicle deck for Yu-Gi-Oh! Remember the generics like Esperidia, Soaring Sun for Shiranui, Shinri, of course, when the promos came out. Then you got like Night Rose with Sea Strike and Largov and Alvina. Made players like, why would I spend money on a deck set, especially if I need to get the generics, which is typically another $100 to $200, if not more, depending on what you need and the supply. So why did Yu-Gi-Oh! Structure Deck, like their approach worked this time? One, it's all shiny. Players love shiny. To a degree, it can be used in the meta. And also they released Genesis format too on top of that. So if players want to explore that with this deck, they can. And again, it's still complete. You just buy 3 of them and you're set, right? But furthermore, on the content creator side, that we've already seen content leading up to the release of it. And then there's going to be only more content being made this weekend and of course next week from more content creators, which I feel like Vanguard could use a little more too. Every so often, there's maybe a few content creators at most that actually talk about products like these and make a video about it, especially helpful ones like what to buy outside of that if you need to buy something, or like what's a good list for budget players and what's a good list for people that want to make it competitive as much as possible, right? I would feel like that's free marketing in general for the game and more excitement, which also helps the businesses carry more products so we avoid supply and demand issues, right? So now imagine this. If Bushiroad took the same approach. We saw this master deck set, and they took a deck that has been out and made it complete. With Yu-Gi-Oh! They also added new cards to not just do that, but the new cards actually provide value for the deck to compete a little bit better than it would be without the new cards too. Now imagine if instead of Buff Zarga came out in a booster set, a retrained unit from the original one, that was a complete deck set, a complete master deck set, that all the cards were shiny. And if you were to do $60, heck, you could probably even charge $80 and Vanguard players would still be happy about it. Why I say Buff Zarga? It's a retrain unit, just like the same with Leonorn and the other deck that got it too. But with the new retrains, it makes it even more enticing, more exciting for players to pick it up, especially for like fans of that deck. Like I constantly talk to Buff Zarga players and they always say that I've been a player since day one. And I'm sure that we're excited with new players picking up the deck as well. And like my brother and Buff Zarga, welcome. Right? But imagine the value with that and the excitement, especially if you can get a metagame deck for less than $100. Most metagame decks that are in the top tiers are $100, $200 plus. And if you get to some of the expensive ones that hit like $300 to $400, talking about you, Keter Sanctuary, and also Dragon Empire, especially with generics when it comes to like the Grade 2 cyclers, those were intense, right? It's very simple, but it would provide a lot of value with that example. And at the end of the day, it comes from a place of caring. I've been part of this community for 10 plus years, both as a player and even as a content creator, approaching those years too. And again, my goal isn't really to complain, but to show the contrasting of what's working in a different TCG that really Bushiroad can implement to also help their community on top of that. I firmly believe that Vanguard has the potential to offer products that really bring that level of value and excitement. And since with the content creator program being a thing now, I hope Bushiroad is listening more. And I'm hoping more voices would give constructive feedback, solutions, ideas to just improve the overall experience for the entire community player base. And let me know in the comments down below, what do you think about this? Perhaps you have some suggestions of your own too. Let's have a conversation too. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Man, I remember the day that Cole called me and told me that the premium deck set didn't even have all crest givers. It was just the one copy. And that was already like $200. And then I remember calling all my local game stores in the area, trying to see if they had it and for a reasonable price on top of that. Luckily, I was able to find it for $70 a pop for these, buying 3 more on top of that. And luckily, I had picked up the generics already, like Esperdia and the others. Man, that's rough. Just thinking about it again. But Nubatama was my first clan, and I really enjoy it, so it's worth it.